everybody, this is Krista and welcome back to Crochet Witch Tarot with special guest
Hello!
Matt Albright Tarot. Matt Albright Tarot. You don't get to speak yet. Anyway, I have Matt here with me today to do a tag that's been going around that I thought would be really fun. It is the Trad Witch tag made by mnomquah. I don't know if I'm saying that username right, so apologies if I'm not. But I'll put the original video down below. And what I gather is this is a tag just to talk about witchcraft practices, which I think is super fun. And I have with me here a
Witch.
Divination witch, yes, is that the term?
A divination witch, if you will.
So, we have two very different practices that I feel like, well, there's some similarities.
I mean, we're very different.
Very different.
We're not all the same.
So I thought it would be fun to have that contrast while we do this. So, not the usual tarot content, but related. Adjacent.
Super fun.
One would say. Alright. You ready?
Oh, I'm here. I'm ready.
Question number 1. What kind of craft do you practice?
I would say divination. This may be shocking.
So what would you consider kind of describes a divination witch?
Okay, so I do a lot of divination. I would say card, tarot is tarot, oracle, cartomancy. Like, that's my main form. I do scrying. I do a little bit with crystals, I would say, but most of it comes down to scrying, a little bit of bibliomancy recently, tarot reading, and then I do a lot of deity work. Through like
divination?
Connecting through divination and meditation.
Neat! Very cool. The kind of craft I would say I practice is...
Who are you? What do you do?
Who am I? That's the question.
Who's the crochet witch?
I would say it definitely leans towards the folk magic realm. So I really like bringing in magic that just becomes part of the everyday life sort of thing, and I like pulling on folk tales and learning about folk traditions and bringing those practices in, definitely obviously including cartomancy, tarot, things of that sort, but it definitely leans more towards the folk magic realm. Okay, number 2 is what paradigm, faith, or philosophy informs your craft? So is there a spirit model, animism, psychological approach, etc., polytheism?
I would say polytheism and animism. Those are like two. I was raised Christian. I know. And I would say, so I lean on that a little bit, but I definitely also lean on animism, the energy and everything, and polytheism, because I connect with different deities and the energy around them. So like if I'm working with Hecate or Nyx, I'm working with them, but I'm also working with the idea of like the dark feminine, the dark goddess.
Oh, that's neat.
What about you?
I would definitely say, which is a term I just learned about, definitely animism, which I didn't know that there was a word for, just kind of thinking everything has spirit or life to it. That is definitely something that has informed my practice and just life thus far. Being convinced that everything has feelings is definitely something that I do. I would also say, I don't know if like polytheism is necessarily the word I would use. I like working with, kind of like you said, the energies or ideas, but I think it's helpful for me to put a name and face.
Yes.
Is that
I like
polytheism?
that. Yeah.
Is like, so
no, I agree with that. I don't
yeah.
know. I'm no dictation. I'm no dictionary. I'm no doctor. I'm no expert.
Okay, so what culture or cultures is your practice rooted in?
I would say I had a lot of, because I still do kind of hold the ideas of polytheism and also like source hand in hand, and I would say I had a lot of Christian influences. So I would say that's like a really big deal for me, is like the idea of source and the idea of energy and everything. And so that kind of tied back to some of my Christian roots, while also kind of allowed me to grow into more of a polytheistic approach.
Is there a certain, because I know you said you work a lot with deities, there a certain pantheon you tend to lean towards, or not really?
Well, because I'm a white person, I try to stick to the Greek, because I do have like Greek or Italian roots. So I think that I like to stick more in that, and that is really where it started, and then kind of like blossomed from there. And I started also like looking more into like saints, like Catholic or Christian saints and angels, and then like going into the Greek pantheon, and then here we are today.
And here we are today.
How about you? What's going on over
So,
there?
what cultures is your practice rooted in? I feel like that's an interesting question, because I don't know that
I just feel like I answered.
So the least I could do is also answer. I guess I've never really thought about my practice pulling on a specific culture per se, but like you said, white person, I try to be very, very conscious of that. I would say I tend to pull most on Celtic traditions, Germanic traditions, because I do have roots there. But I'm also very interested in
What do you just tell me about it?
Lost my
Tell
train of
me what
thought.
you're interested in. I would love to know more about that.
Oh, like American folk traditions, since I am American.
You're American?
But I do also have Catholic roots, so I do find myself, I kind of, for a long time, really shut most of that out, but I do find myself these days
Recently.
incorporating some of that back in, the parts that did kind of make sense to me. How long have you been practicing, and how did it all start? How did it all begin?
Well, little Matt back in the day would talk to things other people couldn't see. And there was some history in my family of other people having like mediumship abilities or seeing dead people or things. And so when I was little, I didn't think that was weird. I just thought I was like, oh yeah, people just like talk to ghosts or things, and that's just me, like talk to dead people. And I kind of shut that off when I was like getting a little bit older, because I was like, no, this isn't like an everyday thing. Like people don't just talk to dead people or talk to like angels or deities, like things. They don't just do that. They don't just like have trances or meditations, and So I stopped doing that. But then I went to college and I made more witchy friends, and I was like, oh, like I could do these things. Like I could be a witch. I could not be a witch. I can connect with things. I could go back into this like meditation and divination.
Yeah.
And so since I got back into college, I've been kind of back in it.
Neat.
How about you?
I would say kind of similar. When I was really young, I would do a lot of, I feel like the classic things we'll talk about, like making potions in the backyard. I used to talk to animals outside. So I feel like they're like, it sounds silly, but I feel like a lot of the things I do now is reconnecting with those habits, but in a way of like, oh no, like this is a thing I can do as an adult too, like that's fine. But I would say I also really kind of shut that out for a long time because, seen as weird. But I probably started bringing it back, I would say a few months after I graduated college, which I don't know how long ago would that be now. Oh my god.
2
years? Is that 3 years?
3? My goodness.
So maybe three years?
It's been 4 years for me.
Oh my.
More of the story, don't go to college.
Oh. Just kidding. Okay. What books or resources did you first start with, and would you recommend them to others today?
Well, I started with like straight up tarot books. Like I started with straight up like not how to read tarot, but like just information about the cards.
Yeah.
And like there was the Fool's Journey or the Something Journey Through.
Yes.
That was one that I would recommend. That's like, of course. So I'd say that's where I started because divination was my like way in. It was like reconnecting with like the angels or the deities or the dead people that I'd been talking to. It's like doing that, and like tarot like was my way back in.
Yes.
So those were definitely like the first books I was looking into witchcraft were like tarot books.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I would say that was the same for me, where tarot is what definitely brought me back into that realm. The one I remember the most is Kitchen Table Tarot by Melissa Sonova. So good. Have you read that one?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna give you my copy to read because it's. So I do recommend it. I listened to it on audiobook, which I really recommend if you like audiobooks. And after I listened to that, she also has Kitchen Table Magic, which is then
That's
what
different.
kind of brought me into it.
That's different. So you start as a witch and then you do the magic. Gotta be a witch first,
yes.
and then you.
Yes. So I did the tarot and
tarot's
learned about that first, and then listened to the Kitchen Table Magic, which brought me into that
tarot
side of it as well.
Like your practice.
Exactly.
Oh
my first. Stevie?
Yeah, Stevie, guest appearance?
Guest appearance.
Hello, Stevie. Hello.
My first real resource, I would say, yikes, was the Cat Tarot.
Amazing.
I spent
How long?
So long.
Talk me through it.
Probably a good year. With just
Me and
that
my
deck
Rider-Waite.
and just the guidebook that came in that. Recommend the deck. I don't recommend it as...
Stevie stuck up on me. Hello. Hello, hi.
I don't recommend it as a first deck, for sure.
Oh man, I had the classic Rider-Waite because I am
did?
nothing if not classic. And it came in like the little like paper, like little, like almost like a cigarette box. Don't smoke, kids. Almost like a little cigarette box. And you opened it up, but like it got so, I used it so much in college, like so fiercely, that it turned into a shredded up, ripped sleeve that I had taped back together around the deck.
Oh my gosh.
And now it like won't even... It will barely let me use it, and like now it's at a point now where it's like I put it in a little one of those cute wooden tarot boxes that has like it has the lovers on it.
Oh, cute.
And so it just stays in there on like this cute little like sentimental shelf area I have.
Nice. Like
and
retired.
And it's like no one touch me, no one touch. It doesn't even hang out with the rest of my decks. It's like I'm over here. I am
That's
tired.
actually the same as mine. I have the Cat Tarot. It's on a shelf
As you
over
can
there.
see, as you can see over there, just
Well,
off
you
screen.
can see.
Oh, it's so pretty, so beautiful. Oh, it's so sad for them.
Now I don't use it. I never use it for myself. The only thing I will use it for now is reading for Stevie, because when I was learning tarot, it was me and her living out on our own,
the dream,
being tough girls in the not even suburbs. I don't know what we were in. Farm country.
Girl bosses of the world.
And so I couldn't get that word. The way I learned tarot was reading for her. So
as you do, as you do,
everyone does.
I did reading for myself because I'm selfish. And all of my college friends, I said, "Hey, you want to read it?"
Yeah. See, I didn't have like anyone around really, so I would do readings for her. So now the only time I'll take that deck out is when I feel like Stevie needs a tarot reading. So otherwise, it's pretty.
When doesn't she?
She actually, she's very sassy. So we don't do it a bunch because usually she is complaining, which.
I mean, she's a cat.
She is a cat.
we love her.
But yeah, otherwise, I don't know if like retired is the right word. But
mine is retired. Mine is like sitting out on its lawn, like yelling at people that get too close. And it's like, because I put it through it.
Okay.
How we change.
How has your practice and or paradigm changed over the years, if at all?
Well, thanks for that question. So I do a lot more, like I did like no spells. Like for the first like few years of being a witch, it was like no spells ever. Like I mean, definitely like prayer, reflection, like divination, and I've actually done way more meditation and like focused intent recently. But like actual like magic, like candle magic, color magic, like all those things, like glamour magic, they came in like once I was like a couple years in, because I was like just divination.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I could do magic.
Yeah.
Because like what else are we doing? Because I can. So I started doing like glamour magic. I started doing like candle, color. Especially the most recent was candle, because I wasn't doing a lot of candle.
Yeah.
Because I'm a double water sign and an earth sign for my top three. So I was like, fine.
What are we doing here?
Not in this house. But then I started to realize that I actually like it.
Yeah.
So that's been like, I would say my most recent has been combining color magic with the glamour that I liked. And then like moving that into like candle magic really recently.
Oh, cool.
Because we love fire now.
We love fire.
Safely.
Safely. Responsibly. That's funny because that actually, candle magic and spells I feel like is where I really started. because I don't like to spend time learning. I like to just, like, we are doing it. I spent an hour listening to this audiobook. I'm ready now.
See, I would ask them, whoever they is, I would ask them. I'd say, can you please help me with this thing?
So I jumped right into spells. And really, like, following the books I was using. So if they suggested a spell, like, that's how I was doing it. And so I would say how it's drastically changed is that I don't do so much spell work nowadays. And when I do, it's usually just kind of going off of my own feeling and putting things together with my own associations. I mean, I still use books, don't get me wrong, but I'm not, like, strictly going by their recipes and what works for them. I'm creating things on my own, I suppose.
Well, you're creative. You have your own deck now. You're busy creating. You can't.
Oh my gosh.
You can't be taken off there, bro. You get bygones. You have a deck. You have a past
days.
You have an empire to build.
So, yeah, I don't do so much of the spells anymore. I really don't do. I did a lot of candle magic. I don't do that so much anymore.
See, I did the opposite. I was like, no candle, no fire, and then now I'm like, well, maybe some candle.
Yeah, I still do some, but it's definitely in a different way where it's more. I'm seeing it as just representing an energy rather than, like, I think when I was first starting, I saw it as, like, this candle is going to, like, do this magic, and it's like now I see it more as, like, a coming from
external representation of
and so that's definitely the difference I would say now. What does your daily/regular practice look like? What do you do on a regular basis?
Chaos. Yeah. No, I would say I try to do at least, like, a pull for me a day, like some kind of reading. I definitely will do I have a Sweet Dreams deck. And this deck is a little mini.
It's one of the little
we'll have to link it in the description.
Rock pool. Yes, it's one of the little rock pool.
But it's the mini
decks.
Yeah, and it's like Sweet Dreams, and it's for, like, either right before you go to bed, like to reflect on when you're asleep, like, or as you're going to bed, or, like, right when you wake up to kind of reflect on for that day. And I will pull, like, 1 to 2 cards, like, almost every day, if not every day. And that I keep next to my little Morpheus altar. Morpheus and Hypnos. They help me sleep. And I love them. I love Nyx. They're, like, 3 of Morpheus, Hypnos, Nyx. Especially Nyx and Morpheus are, like, 2 of my, like, closest deities that I work with. And I keep it next to Morpheus. And I will open it, like, either right before I go to bed or right when I wake up. And it's, like, a little message that he's like, hello.
Very cool.
And that I try to do some kind of divination every day. And then everything else happens, like, weekly. Like, candle magic, or spells, or, like, meditation, or focusing more on scrying, or, like, trying to bring about something, like asking deities or source or whatever for, like, that is more, like, weekly, monthly.
Yeah. Very cool. So actually, I forgot to mention, Matt has a podcast with your friend Andrea.
At Andrea Hoy on Instagram.
And I was wondering, it's called Am I Right Witches? So it is all about witchcraft and subjects thereof.
And we get to do some research and learn about stuff that we want to learn about. So we said, why not talk about it?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Do you think that the research you do for your podcast reflects at all in your, like, practice?
Yes. Okay, so yes, that's definitely is now a big part. Because I do that weekly. I do that every single week.
Right.
I research a different topic.
Yeah.
And even if it's a topic I know about, like, I still have to do at least some level of, like, research. Like, or if it's something I don't know about. Like, even deities that I work with, I've gotten a better relationship because I'll do a little bit of research about them. Like, if we do an episode on them.
Yeah.
So I think it really taught me about using research about things I'm interested in to help with my craft. Because initially I was like, no research. And now it's like, well, I can do it to learn. I can also do it, like, for the podcast to, like, talk to other people about it.
Yeah.
So it, like, made it more of, like, a sparking joy and less of, like, a research.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. Cool. So my daily practice looks like actually, Andy and I do a reading together every morning. So that's where we start. And then from there, I do a morning reading for myself. And
What about Instagram?
Well, that's what I post on Instagram.
Okay.
So my morning reading for myself, I usually post on Instagram.
So that's, like, a big part, too. So would you consider yourself a tech witch?
Is that a thing?
Everything's a thing. Everything's a thing.
That is a big part of my practice because I just really like taking photographs, and I feel like part of the joy I get out of it is pairing decks and seeing how they look together, and that really comes through in the
Love
pictures. So that's definitely a big part. And I do, on like a monthly basis, I tend to do polls with the new moon and the full moon.
Oh yes, moon. We love moon magic. Yes, that's another. We love moon magic.
And at night I do try and do some sort of poll with a deity or just general.
You know a few of those. You have some friends.
Or just like general like shadow work, I guess you could call it.
We love shadow work. Shadow work is self-work.
I try to do that. It's not every night, of course, but for me that's like, if I'm going to do it, it's a nighttime activity. Like I have to wait till it's dark out. I don't know why, it's just I cannot do it when it's daylight. So.
Well, what about making a deck? Was that part of your practice?
Casual.
Was that part of your practice?
Yes, well,
What was the name of that deck again? What was that deck that you made?
the Cottage Witch Oracle.
Is that available for purchase?
Will be.
It will be available for purchase. Okay.
Not quite yet.
Okay.
But the cards in that deck are based off of the kind of signs and symbols that have to do with my own practice. So there's like herbs that I work with, animals, birds are animals, but I consider them a separate category, like birds,
So would you say
tools.
that your deck would be a great way to connect with folk magic?
The way I see it, yes.
Oh my!
I would say so. And
Well,
of
I think
course,
that's a must-have.
Of course, it's it's something that I think you could use and like have your own interpretation for sure.
This year / next year's hottest gift.
What a hype man! Okay. Are there aspects of your craft that you need to keep secret? In your opinion, is secrecy important in witchcraft?
I would say secrecy is important as it has to do with safety. It depends how safe you are to practice. And I know that there are some things that have a stigma, and it's like demon magic has a huge stigma. People that work with the devil, Satan, or like if you work with Lucifer, it's like things have stigmas against them. So like if you don't feel safe to talk about it, like then it's not safe to talk about.
Right.
And I do think that there is a level of privacy too. Like if something's very personal to you, it's like your personal hygiene. It's like personal. It's things, not in a way of saying that it's like dirty or anything. Just in a way of saying like if it's yours and it's personal and you feel that it needs to be yours, then that's valid. And if you don't feel safe, that's valid. And like even, I mean, stigma. There's just wide arrays of stigma because there are some people that are okay with some stuff, not other stuff. They'll be like, oh, like I don't like no deities, but like I could do this or this, or like just stigmas against certain aspects. So I think it's, if you are okay with certain things, not okay with certain things, it's like, then you can kind of have your personal business, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing it, then that's okay.
For sure. How do you think that that looks in your practice, would you say?
Well, I'm lucky because I don't really talk about shadow work as much as I sometimes would like to, but I do like shadow work, and I try to talk about it a lot because I just feel like people think that it's like bad because it's like shadow, and I'm like, no, like you're working on yourself. And I do think that like there are some entities that are darker or like lighter, quote unquote, or darker, quote unquote, and like I work with some like darker entities, quote unquote, and I work with like some quote unquote like angelic, more like lighter entities. And I feel like sometimes you're in a space where it's like you really only feel like you can talk about like the lighter ones.
Right.
So like I'll start talking about like Aphrodite first, who I work with, as opposed to like some of the darker entities I work with, because you don't know how people are going to react.
Yeah.
Or like if I'm talking to someone who's more like a more like Christian or something background that might not be as open, I'll talk about like working with angels and like that, and like as opposed to the opposite side of that, or like the other things that I might work with. It's like you have to talk about with like what you think would be okay with certain people. Yeah,
that makes sense. I feel
you?
like for me, I don't know if like I see it as secrecy. I think again it's definitely a personal kind of call there. But for me, if I'm doing something with my practice or with tarot and I am talking to someone who I know is interested in that, I'm telling all.
Yeah.
It is a women tells all. And like I very much like have everything, what's the saying, like everything on your sleeve?
Heart on your sleeve?
Yes.
Open book?
Open book.
Open book on your sleeve.
I have an open book with things like that. I don't really ever feel like there's things that I need to keep private per se. when I am talking to someone who I know has a similar interest.
So like when me and Chris are talking,
Oh,
you know, it's whatever it's gonna
it's
be.
all out there.
And be like, oh yeah, like we had a conversation with the sky. That's fine. But like, if we're
I talked to this squirrel today.
and I'm like, of course you did. I'm like, that's and good on
Right.
you. Good on that squirrel.
But like I think I do tend to just like, I don't know, accidentally is not the right word, but I don't really talk about my practice with people who, I know don't have that interest, but I feel like it's more in a way of it doesn't come up, so I just don't
And I will
talk about it.
say there is definitely a vetting process that definitely begins with looks, because like if I see like a 21-year-old with split dye, I'm gonna be like, so Tara.
So
like, I immediately would be like, let's talk about it.
Right.
But which isn't always fair, but I'm gonna be way more open if someone appears to be interested or open to.
Gotcha. It's I feel like I always wait to be approached about the subject. Like I'm never like, do you like?
Yeah.
So I think that's why I say I don't know if it's necessarily secrecy. It's more just there's certain people I interact with where it just like wouldn't come up, you know? Yes. I don't really...
And I have friends who, are witches and don't care as much. Like, they might want readings, so that they're interested in. But like, the rest of it, like...
Right. So I think it just all kind of depends.
I think that's really well said. I agree.
What are some of your favorite tools that you use regularly?
Well, I have the screwdriver that I don't know if you... Haha, I'm so funny. But I would say I have a few main decks, and I have... Oh, I gotta use it. I just forgot what I was gonna say. But I have a few main decks that are like my go-tos. Yep. I'm like, these get me. And even like my Sweet Dreams deck. It's like that one I'm like, hello Morpheus, hello Dreams.
Yeah, they're related to certain practices.
Yes, and I'm like, that is like my go-to for that. I would say scrying. I literally have a face mirror.
Neat.
That I'm like, this is my scrying mirror.
I've never tried to scry before.
The first time I did it was by accident. So, really hard to get into. It's a very exclusive field. You have to be really good at staring off into nothingness and zoning out. Right. But no, I literally have it's from Trixie Cosmetics, aka the Trixie Mattel drag queen makeup brand.
Yes.
And it's a pastel pink and blue, heart-shaped hand mirror.
As it should be.
And I know you're like supposed to do it with like a black back, and I'm like, who has the time? Who has the time? I'm busy. I'm trying to zone out.
I feel like if the Trixie Mattel mirror speaks to you. Then...
Oh, and it does. And how? And how? If the mirror could talk, and it does, it would say lots of things.
I'm picturing that mirror from Shrek.
Very similar situation.
Right.
But yeah, so I would say like my handy dandy scrying mirror.
Yes.
Certain decks that I use more than others, depending on who I'm working with, like the closest, like my altar, like my seasonal altar.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That's a big, because I'm clearing out the fall one. We're making room for the winter one.
Yeah.
It's Yule time.
It's
Yule time, baby. So we're clearing out the oranges. We're bringing in the whites, and the blues. And yes, I would say my seasonal altar, my decks that I've been using more of, my scrying materials, and like that's what we're doing.
Awesome. I think for me, there's definitely, I would say just like tarot decks in general. I think
Do you have any of those?
Just a few.
Okay, good.
I've been starting to notice recently, within I would say like the past 6 months or so, that I have decks that do feel like they fit into a very specific practice, which before that it was kind of like I would definitely feel energy from the different ones and choose them based on that, but it wasn't necessarily consistent per se. But now I notice that it's like this deck, if I'm doing this, I'm pulling out this one.
Like, so what's an example?
So if I am working with fairy energy, specifically the fairies outside, I'm always going to use my fairies oracle.
As opposed to the domesticated fairies. As opposed to the fairies that are all about the inside.
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure. Okay.
That I use the other little rock pool deck.
Where'd you get that from?
Oh, just some person.
I gave her that deck. I'm a big fan of her. I would say I agree though, because I will use my floral or botanical decks or oracle. I will use more like oracle decks, or especially plant-themed oracle decks, like my Southern Gothic Oracle, her other deck. It's the plant...
The Southern Botanic one?
Yeah, the Southern Botanic, yes. Or my Layla Olive Pythia Botanical. Yeah. Like very floral oracle decks for talking to the dead. Like that's what
neat. Yeah, that's very interesting. I use a pendulum.
Oh man, me too.
Not super often. That's if I use it mostly
what situations?
for like yes or no questions, but I do also use Lenormand for that. I just kind of like shuffling cards, so I tend to.
Whenever we talk on the phone, there's always like a little noise in the background. Pendulum, because my spirit guide is kind of, he doesn't really like to like be super verbal, so I'll use a pendulum with him because
right. Are there any other tools I use? Mostly cards, I would say. Pendulum, candles. I do like lighting candles and setting energy that way. I guess you could consider it a tool.
I wouldn't. I don't think it's a tool. I think that's really silly. I think we should be
crazy.
I think that's really crazy.
Last question.
Oh, music. Music, yes. Like you were saying, to set the vibe. Music.
Oh, that's a good one.
I have different playlists for different like things that I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I love that you do that. What books or resources would you recommend to newbie witches interested in your kind of craft?
I would say, first of all, when it comes to tarot, I would say you don't need to be a snob. I would say, like, I literally started with, like, the most, like, not quote-unquote basic, quote-unquote, like, one that brought tarot into the mainstream more, like, the Rider-Waite, and you started with the cat tarot, and it's like, we both ended up, like, on the same YouTube video, doing the same thing. Like,
yeah, I feel like you can pick whatever you want.
Yeah, so, I would say, really, look, for the intro to whatever. Look for like whatever you want to go into. Like just look up like intro to whatever. Like the little little book of. I love the book series. It's like the little book of. Like little book of tarot, little book of meditation, little book of. Love those ones. Or 30 seconds, like we saw at Barnes and Noble. The 30 seconds of whatever. I would say just start with like the basic things, and like you'll find out right away like if you like it or not, because it'll be a very like this is this, and if a certain deck like a cat deck or a Rider-Waite or something else, and now like we barely use those decks anymore. We have different decks we like. If you like a deck, who cares? Like if you like it and you're like, this is good vibes, like start with that one and start with like the most basic whatever intro that you want to start with.
Very good.
What you got?
I would say I'm trying to think of books that I have. I would still consider myself newer.
Oh, I'm not an expert. No, I don't mean to say this. Yeah, no. I'm like no.
I just mean that, like, I have books that, like, I'm still currently reading through. I have Italian Folk Magic is a really good one. I'm looking at my books. New World Witchery, I love. There's a few audiobooks I've been listening to. I really enjoy audiobooks for this kind of thing.
Yes, I don't know why. Or like podcast. I really like podcasts because there was like even podcasts that will go through the deck. Because there are podcasts that will literally go through card by card of the decks or major minor arcana, and they will literally say like that podcaster's interpretation, which you can agree or disagree, but they will talk about their interpretation. Of the deck card by card, and that has been really helpful for me because if you have to do commutes or you have to be in the car or you just are doing other things and you just can't like you're not in a position where like either you're tired or you just don't want to sit and read a book. Because if you want to, perfect, little book of, go ahead. But if you're not in that position, then definitely I would say podcasts. Like look up like podcasts about tarot, podcasts about witchcraft, like Am I Right Witches? And you can learn about like getting into it more.
Yes, the Wildly Tarot podcast is actually, I forgot to mention, I really learned off of that podcast as well. They do mostly weekly deck reviews, but they do have a series where they go through card by card, and I binged that alongside my cat tarot, and I love that one.
Tarot for the Wild Soul.
Yes, love that one.
A lovely one, and she'll go by, and it's like very much like tarot looking inward, like tarot of the soul. Like I don't want to say shadow work, but like looking inward with tarot, and like looking at how you can look at different cards to kind of read yourself into introspection or helping other people do reflection. So I love her, and she's a really soothing voice.
I also really like Books and Broomsticks. That one gets a bit into all different kinds of witchcraft, but like it does talk about folk traditions a bit. A new one. I do. A new one, or I can't find the one I just started listening to. That's okay. I also really like, if we're talking like, because the question was like specifically our practices, I suppose. If you're interested in folk magic, I definitely recommend looking into folk tales of the, I guess, culture you're interested in or that you connect with. I definitely think that is a really cool idea. An audiobook I'm listening to is Botanical Folk Tales of Britain and Ireland.
Ooh, what?
So
I would say with my specific craft, like I started with the basic books. Like I started with the like shorter intros that are like these are short and sweet. They'll kind of give you an introduction, and then from there, my research kind of led me like to Google, like to look online, to find podcasts, because then I really found that like podcasts and things like that really helped me get deeper. Like I could read and like get a more basic understanding, and then that could lead me to what I wanted to research more.
Right.
And then podcasts kind of also helped me because I could just listen.
Yeah, listening, it's easier for our brains.
For our little spicy brains, our neurospicy brains.
But that was the last question.
We did it.
I think
we did it.
I think we did
I
it.
think we did it.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I will link all of Matt's links below. Yeah, I think that's all we have for today.
Thank you.
Alrighty, we will see you all again very soon.